Welcome, y'all, to this week's episode drop. I'm excited as usual because I have another incredible guest to bring to you this week. His name is Dan Baumann. He's a fellow YWAMer. He is a missionary. He's a speaker. He's an author. And I am telling you what. Okay, listen, for real. No matter who you are, no matter what your situation in life is, no matter what you are facing, this episode will encourage you. And the title, I know, is Imprisoned in Iran, so it feels like maybe like most or / all of us have not been there, obviously, but it's really not about being imprisoned in Iran. It's about this man's journey with God through a really difficult situation. He talks about his time imprisoned. He talks about his love for the Muslim community and the Muslim part of the world. He explains some things, I think, really clearly that sometimes us here in America don't always understand about the Muslim faith. And you are just going to be so encouraged that a life of friendship with God will always land you in good places, no matter what you're facing today. So enjoy this conversation with Dan Baumann. Where am I talking to you from? Where are you?
I'm in YWAM in Kona, Hawaii.
You are? Okay, I just got back from Kona.
Okay.
You were in Dallas maybe when I was going through Kona.
Wow. Did you come through the base or ships or anything?
I spoke at ships, DTS. Yep. And so maybe just a quick backtrack. How did you grow up? Where did you grow up? Tell me a little bit about your family.
My parents are from Europe. My father is Swiss. My mother is Swedish. My dad came over to the States, to LA, looking for work as a carpenter. My mom came with her whole family. And they met at a church in Los Angeles. So, yeah, I feel very much, in many ways, first generation American.
Sure.
And, yeah, they got a house, and that's where I grew up. And I got an older sister and younger sister.
Awesome. Were you raised Christian? Was your family Christian?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, my parents had us go to church 3-4 times a week my whole life, as far as I knew. Was it in your 20s that when did you really get a heart for the world and for the nations? Well, how did that come about? Well, for me, everything started when I was 16.
Okay.
Because my walk with God was very much in my head as a kind of a religion. You do the right thing, you don't do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But there was no real connection with God in the sense of him being a friend, in the sense of him close to me. And when I was 16, a man came to my church, and this is what he told me. He said, everything you do for God needs to come from intimacy with God. And he said that over and over again about intimacy with God, that should be the core of where our Christian relationship is with God. And I just thought, okay, well, how do you get that? I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I took the afternoon off and I went to the mountains. As I went to the mountains, that's where the retreat was, where I heard this. I just picked up these random rocks and started throwing them in the water. And I tried to figure out, how do you get close with God, like on Monday or Tuesday, or get gas, or going to the store or going to the beach? Like, is God just there that we do the right thing, or does he actually want to know me as a person?
Oh, that is so real.
So,
yes. What do you do on a Monday morning after church? Yeah.
So as I began to do that, I started to hear a question in my mind. Dan, can I throw rocks with you? And I had no idea what that was. And so I kept throwing these rocks and just tried to figure out this friendship, intimacy with God thing. Like, how does that get real in a person's life? And I'm throwing the rocks, thinking about it. I hear the question a second time. Hey, Dan, can I throw rocks with you? And this went on for quite a while. And I kept hearing this simple question. So finally I had to think, well, where does it come from? Like, I don't think it's me unless I'm going crazy. And it's not the devil, because he wants to throw rocks at me, not with me. It can't be God. No, it can't be God because God's like great and he's amazing and throwing rocks doesn't matter. Like it's not a big deal and it's just Dan's random life. God, why would God care? But I kept hearing that question. And I finally stopped and said, Jesus, is that really you? Yeah, of course, you can throw rocks with me, but why? And that's when I felt like Jesus looked down from heaven and said this right to my heart. Dan, I want to throw rocks with you because you want to throw rocks.
Wow.
And for the first time in my life, I discovered the unconditional love of God. For the first time in my life, I discovered that God likes me. For the first time, I discovered that God was not just into me doing the right thing. No, he actually enjoyed me as a person. That when I go for a walk, he wants to go for a walk. That when I go to the beach, he wants to go to the beach. And if I'm throwing rocks, he wants to throw rocks. Why? Simply because he enjoys my company. And love is the deepest motivator in the heart. And the more you discover God's love for us, the more you're free to want to know how to love him back.
Yeah.
So how do I get involved in the world? I simply started wanting to ask God what's on his heart. And that wasn't out of any obligation, though. And that's part of the beauty is it was never meant to be obligation.
Yeah.
It's always meant to be an overflow of you can't help but ask what's on his heart because you're discovering his love so deep. And yeah, that's when I began to find out God's love for the whole world. And as much as I was discovering that love of God, I just wanted the whole world to discover it too.
Wow. So where did that take you?
Well, I just continued in this journey of enjoying God, discovering God. And then Youth with the Mission, we run discipleship schools, as you know. And I did one. And I did an outreach in India. Yeah, we did a whole year. And I went to Lebanon. And that was what really changed my life.
What about that changed your life?
I had no idea what my future would be. Other than I wanted to serve God, other than I wanted people to know about his love for them. And in Lebanon, in the 80s, when I was there, it was in the midst of civil war. And there were bomb attacks and rocket attacks. It was very hard to be there. Many people thought we were crazy. We were there when the American embassy was bombed.
Oh, my goodness.
Which was the biggest attack on American soil up till that point.
Wow.
Since World War II. And so, it was just, just a crazy time. And when people found out that we were there as Americans and didn't want to leave, it really caused me to realize that, I wanted to love people that were in war or love people that, were struggling. And so, it really changed me. Yeah, and like a typical YWAMer, you're just asking God what to do with your life. And it's this very random moment. I felt like God say, study business.
Really?
Yeah, so everyone was saying stay in YWAM, but I knew I needed to go get a 4-year business degree, so that's what I did.
Okay, interesting. So you had this experience in India and Lebanon, came back and went to college.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Does that play? I'm interested in how that plays out later. Why God told you to do that? Yeah,
well, that's a huge part of the story, actually.
Really? Okay. So, take us to what happened next after Lebanon.
Okay, I had a great...
And after the degree.
Yeah, I got the degree. And so then I came back home. I went to college in Chicago, a place called Wheaton College. And I came back home looking for business degrees, but I still had this heart yearning for working in the Muslim world. That was very much what happened in Lebanon, a big heart for the Muslim world, including areas of conflict.
Okay, wow.
And as I was walking around one day, I felt like God told me that he would send me to somewhere in Central Asia, Middle East, somewhere over there, and that I would actually use my business degree.
Wow.
But I didn't know where, I didn't know what. I knew that maybe my business degree would come in handy for getting a visa in a country. So I had this initial sense from God, but it wasn't really clear where. And it was about a month later that my older sister, came home. She was visiting. My older sister had already been a missionary for 6-7 years in Nepal. She was very much my hero, one who was kind of pushing us as a family to think about missions.
Wow. What's her name?
Her name is Liz Cochran, Elizabeth Cochran.
Okay.
And she got a phone call when she was at home visiting from a guy who had heard of a humanitarian organization in Afghanistan that was accepting Christians to come work in a hospital. And we had no YWAMers in the country, but the guy said to the friend of Liz that, yeah, we want to start accepting YWAMers. And what we really need help with is on the business side of a hospital, like the admin side.
Oh, wow.
So that's what he tells her on the phone. Like, there's an open door for YWAMers in admin at a hospital in Afghanistan. If you know anyone who wants to go to that part of the world, down to DTS. And so she hangs up the phone and turns around and says, Dan, you want to go to Afghanistan?
Oh my goodness. So what was the climate like at that time there?
Much worse than today.
Okay. Yeah. It was in the darker days there. Yeah.
Yeah. When Russia was getting finally kicked out, but that left a lot of civil war, which lasted for about 5 years. And then we had Taliban for 5 years, basically the 90s.
So did you just say yes and you're on a plane?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't that easy.
Okay.
I had to contact the organization, and they said two things. One, that they only made decisions once a year because of a board that they gather to make decisions on new workers. And they had just had that meeting a month before I applied. So I would have to wait 11 months. And then the other thing they said was that I needed money because it was volunteer. And they said, that don't come over unless you have $1,500 a month. So that was the plan. I had to work and I would have to wait. And so that was what I was going to do. And that's when it was my younger sister who came and challenged me, like, don't worry about all this, getting a side job or whatever, just to get a little more money. She said, God will provide. Why don't you spend these months you have to wait to find out if you get there by getting your heart in order? In other words, go live among Afghans. And there was a spot in Delhi, India. And YWAM had just opened it. And there, she had heard that there's quite a few thousand Afghan refugees in Delhi, India. And she's like, that's near Afghanistan. So why don't you go there, get connected to that, connect to the Afghans. And then when you get accepted, you are more connected to their language and culture rather than just being distant. And God will provide the money. So that's what she said.
Wow. Did that advice pan out?
Well, it's so funny because I told her, no way, I need money. Then she got very direct with me and she said, why are you more interested to be run by your wallet than your heart? And I'm like, oh man. She said, pray.
She got you.
So I prayed. And God was very clear. I don't hear God clear often, but that day I did, where he said, listen to your sister. So I had enough money for that one-way ticket, and I lived 9 months in Delhi. I got to meet so many Afghans, their language, their culture. It ended up being such a beautiful time. And then I remember as the time got towards the time when they would have had that board meeting about Afghanistan and if I'd get accepted, I called my mom and I'm like, I wonder if they've actually written or what's the result. She said, Dan, we got a letter. And she opened the letter. And basically it said, congratulations, you've been accepted to work in Afghanistan. And then he said, you need to know something, though, about flying into Afghanistan. So please call me before you get your tickets. And his name was Chris. So The next day I called Richard. Hi, I'm Dan. He's like, congratulations. We're excited to have you in Afghanistan. I said, I'm excited to come. He's like, okay, well, as you get your tickets next month, as you come, you need to know something. Because of the war, because of the situation, there is only one city in the world that has flights to Kabul, Afghanistan. So wherever you fly from, you got to at least go to this city first before you get here. So I'm like, what's the city? He's like, Delhi, India.
No way.
Yeah, I'm like, Delhi. Yeah.
No way. Oh.
And then he looks at me and he's like, have you heard of it?
You're like, yeah, living it, bro.
I live there. I've been here 9 months. And like, what? And I told him what I'd be doing. And he's like, are you in Delhi now? I said, yeah, I'm in Delhi. And he's like, I'm calling you from Delhi. I'm
Shut
like, no,
up.
like, yes. And he was 10 minutes down the road.
You're kidding.
No. The next day I had a coffee. And I know.
Oh my goodness.
And then I found out later when I got accepted to the organization that for kind of mental health things because of the war, they required all their workers to leave the country twice a year.
Oh, wow.
But twice a year was like, yeah, the only flights are to Delhi. And now I've lived in Delhi 9 months.
Now there you are. Wow.
So I'm like totally at home in Delhi. And so what? I come back here all the time. I love it here. I'm at home and have lots of friends. And yeah, it was awesome. It was like God knew something I didn't know.
Yeah, as he always does, right?
Sure, he's committed. He knows what we need and he knows what's best for us.
Oh my goodness. Okay, can I backtrack you for a minute until I hear the second part of the story? What made you fall in love with the Muslim people? Was there something about it or them specifically?
I mean, this would get kind of a whole new level when I get to Afghanistan, but
yeah.
Basically,
you can take us on to Afghanistan if that'll help explain more of your heart for the Muslim people.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really simple. And basically, I got on a plane. 2 hours later, I was in Kabul. And yeah, 99.99% Muslim. I would say it's the strictest Muslim nation in the world today, really? Wow. For sure. If you would
Afghanistan.
Yeah, if you look at how lifestyle is and yeah, a lot of connected to poverty. Yeah, it's just strict in that sense. But yeah, to fall in love with them is basically get to know them, you know, and they're just people and they're people created in the image of God.
Yeah.
So one, I found out God's love for them. Two, I found out that they could teach me about Jesus. Why? Because they're created in God.
Wow.
And I saw things in their culture and who they are that just reminded me of God. And so, and with that came God's heart for them, you know, like, man, God loved them. He knew the name of their family and friends, and he liked what they liked. And all of a sudden it became real, like, yeah, you know, 1.2 billion people in the world. And all of a sudden, yeah, they have no idea that, yeah, God wants to throw rocks with them or that God likes them.
Wow.
And so it just became something that just won my heart, basically.
Oh, in what ways did they, in the culture or in their family systems, how did it represent Jesus to you? Or how did it, because I feel like we're so scared oftentimes of other faiths, obviously, because you're an American now, so you're well versed with it, I'm sure. But we can just make it such an outgroup and so much fear surrounding it. And in what ways did they teach you about Jesus? Like, do you have specifics? I just love this.
For sure I do. But I think the biggest specific is that we don't let the media run our life.
Amen to that.
And so, yeah, it's the media that causes us to go on tangents of ideas of cultures and places in the world and situations that, yeah, the media might not be showing at all the whole truth. And, because again, that is where most fear is born. And so most people who think about the Muslim world think of fear based on what they've heard.
Yep.
And the reality is that they're incredibly loving. I mean, the way they love each other, they're very community oriented. Everyone in a village or a town or an area would all know each other. They would give their back for each other. I've never seen hospitality on such a high level. Like they would be more excited that you dropped in than if you set up an appointment. Because you coming is the greatest honor to them. Who cares if it's organized and you had something else you were doing? They just think it's so awesome that you cared enough that you showed up.
Wow.
And
I love that.
Oh, that's like Jesus. He wants us just to come.
Isn't it?
Wait for an appointment. He just wants us to show because he likes us.
That's such a good point because so many people, I think, and I'm not bagging on the church because I'm a pastor, so I can do this. I can say this. And I'm not bagging on America because I'm an American, so I can do this. But I do think we can get in the mindsets that you talked about, your pre-16 of, I just check the box, I do the thing, and that is not what God wants for us. He wants more. And we deep down want more. And so I love that you like made a point of that. It's like they didn't want an appointment and God doesn't either.
No, he doesn't either. No. And he just wants us to say hi. He
wants to say hi and throw some rocks or he drinks some chai tea or.
Yeah. You have to go back even to the very start of it all, when Adam and Eve have sinned, what does God say? He doesn't say, why did you do that? He says,
where are you? Yep.
He wants them, he just,
yes.
And that is what the Afghans taught me about God, about the character of God, is that the way they wanted me was I just felt really loved.
Wow. So you are fully embraced in those communities.
Yeah, fully embraced, and again, of our media, that the Americans, they love Americans,
Oh.
And they love me. They love Americans. And all over that part of the world, there is a few, how to say it? There's a few bad eggs in every batch.
Yep. There's plenty of bad eggs over here.
Exactly. There's that reality here. It's just like, it's the same there, but most people are great and they very kind and loving, and all they want to do is help their family, get food on the table, and they love guests. Like they take guests I've ever seen.
Oh my goodness. That's so beautiful. Most of my experience cross-culturally has been primarily Buddhism.
Okay.
And I mean, obviously, just people to fall in love with on, minute one.
Right.
But I haven't had a lot of experiences. I mean, Malaysia a little bit, but with the Muslim communities. And so I love just getting more information about how they operate and what's important to them and how welcoming they are of this guy that came from, well, as far as they know, Delhi, but essentially Los Angeles. And how honored they were to have you. And just, I think I love what you're saying is that like all people are made in God's image. And if we can stop villainizing.
Yeah.
So
it's so real.
This brings me to my next question, because you have good reason to villainize.
Yeah.
Which is the next part of your story. So will you walk me through Afghanistan? So you get to Afghanistan. Are you by yourself or are you with your buddy at that point?
No, I'm there in Afghanistan working at the hospital. And then it came about that me and a friend started praying about what to do over Christmas. We had a 2-week break.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, living there for many, many years, one, I spoke the language, but two, you get a heart for that area of the world, not just the country you're in.
Absolutely.
And directly to the west is Iran, and they speak the same language as Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan speaks, a few languages, but Iran, the primary language, is the main business or the language that I learned in Afghanistan. A dialect difference.
And what's the name of that language? What's it called?
Well, Farsi is the Iranian official name, but the Afghan version is Dari, which is a dialect of it. It's basically same.
Okay. Same, but different, as they say in Thailand.
Pretty much. But yeah, I mean, anyone fluent in either could understand the other.
Okay. So you guys decide to take a Christmas trip.
Yeah, but we had a very specific interest to start to share Jesus and open doors. And we got on a bus and we had a great 2 weeks in Iran. I fell in love with Iran like I did Afghanistan. Yeah, I was so amazed at the same exact thing about how people love Americans. But more than that was the hunger for God. Yeah, and it came to us. I was eating a hamburger the first night, and this guy walks up to me and asked me if I spoke English. I said yes, and then he said, where are you from? And I said, America. And he's like, oh, I heard Americans know about Jesus. I said, I do? He's like, tell me. And I'm like, sure. And we went to his house and gathered about 20 people from his college and spent the night talking about Jesus.
Wow. It found you.
Yeah. And this was the response almost every day. Different people we were meeting, they wanted to know more. And that there's such a hunger for God in Iran, which today would be probably the fastest growing church in the world.
Really?
Yeah.
Where do you think, this is a total side question, but where do you think that hunger comes from?
One, I think it's probably innate in the sense that God,
humanity,
wants us to want him because he created us. But more than that, I would say 40 years of oppression from a very, very strict Islamic government and all the stories, which is thousands that have come out of there of problems and the challenges that have come with strict Islam, not to mention the sanctions against the country politically. But life has been hard for people. And so that causes them to be hungry for more.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Out of that, it's a similar thing you saw in China about 30 years ago, where there was this slow growth of this thing called the house church.
Yep.
And that is very much what's going on in Iran, where there's millions of following Jesus through the house church movement.
Really? Wow, that's incredible. Oh, yeah, I followed, is it Brother Yoon?
Yeah, Brother Yoon story.
In the Chinese movement.
Right. And Iran is it's happening right now. We don't hear about it because of political stuff about Iran. But I fell in love with Iran and fell in love with the people. And I was amazed at the hunger that was there, even back when I was there.
Wow. So you're meeting up with people, you're taking your vacation time. It's funny, vacation time, telling people about Jesus, vacation time being a missionary.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so what happened after that?
We're on a local bus and we get to the border, and in any border crossing nation to nation, you get your passport stamped and returned and then continue to the other side, the other border. Yep. We were with about 15 locals. And they all got their passports back, but me and my friend didn't. And I was traveling on my Swiss passport. I'm dual citizen, Swiss American through my dad. And so I often use the Swiss passport.
Sure.
Wherever I go.
I would too. Yeah.
And my friend was South African, and both Switzerland and South Africa had embassies in the capital of Iran, Tehran. Long story short, we had 2-week visas. But for whatever reason, they weren't giving our passports back. And finally, The bus driver came and said, well, we can't wait forever. We're like, we know, but we don't know why they're not coming back. And eventually the bus left. And it was many hours later that the authorities who had taken our passports came and said, there's a problem with your visas. We're like, no, we thought we had the right stuff. He goes, yeah, we think so too, but we've checked into it and we've had to send your passports into the security building. And don't worry about it, but you will have to go there to get them. We're like, where's there? They said, oh, it's in a certain building, but it's in Tehran. I'm like, that's 15 hours away by bus. He's like, yes, it'll take a few days anyway to get there. So wait a few days, go in to get it. And don't worry, they'll sort it out and you'll be on your way. But we're like, why? He's like, yeah, we don't really know. So long story short, we walk in 3 days later. We're scared. We don't know why, but we're hopeful. They had said it would only be a few minutes. So we came in. They wanted to talk to us privately. And that's when they took me to a room and started to beat me. And for about 6 hours, they beat me, yelled at me, screamed at me. They never said why. They took me down these stairs. They've been doing the same to my friend in another room. That's when they took off my glasses. My friends had glasses as well, and they blindfolded us. They took us out into a car, threw us in the back. They took us for about 20 minutes across town. There in another building, they kept beating us. They finally took all our clothes away. Again, there was no explanation why, just yelling and screaming. And they finally put us in prison clothes. And that's when they blindfolded us a last time and took us down these stairs and separated us. And without any explanation, we were imprisoned in Iran, my friend in one room and me in another one.
Wow. How old are you at this point?
I'm 33.
33. Okay.
I lived 10 years in Afghanistan.
You were already there for 10 years.
Yeah, well, yeah, nine.
Give or take, yeah. Okay. Wow. I didn't put that part when I was reading the book. I didn't put that part together that you weren't just a visitor. You were
I knew
practically a local, yeah.
I know the culture, and okay, it's not Afghanistan, but it's not that much different. And so, yeah, there was a lot of connection on that end.
What's going through your mind as you realize, like, I am in a really bad situation?
Yeah, just to be really honest, yeah, it was the worst time of my life.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just spiritually, first of all, like, what's going on? Like, I've trusted God, and now I'm in a room that's locked, you know? And I'm going to get beaten every day, and they never said why, and what's going on. Then on a personal level, it was like, wait a minute. And then I found out later that I had 2 death sentences on my life. One for being a missionary and one for being a spy.
Oh, wow. How did they deduct that?
They had, again, I don't want to say this in many ways because I don't want it to discourage any future tourism ideas.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Just say whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone wants to go to Iran, I would say it's safe. I would say go for it.
It's very safe. Yeah. Okay. But that's good to know.
My situation was super specific. And because of my work in Afghanistan, somewhere 7, 8 years before that, someone had gotten my name on a watch list. And so they had a watch list on me in Iran. Like, if this guy ever shows up, we want to get him.
Okay.
Basically, my Christian work, and also they thought I was a spy for America.
Okay. Because
of my dual citizenship, is the Swiss thing really real? Or is it just fake so that I can do spy work for America?
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. So how long were you there, and what was the experience like there? Did you ever
Uh,
see anybody else? Did you ever see your friend? Were the guards all mean? Were they not? Because it's just, to me, like, knowing, again, I don't know the Muslim culture well, but from what you've said and from what I have heard from people who have really lived with them like you have, they are wonderful people. Where was the disconnect to what you were experiencing in prison?
well, for real, I knew very quickly that I was in a different situation.
Okay. Yep.
I was
Yeah.
not with the Muslim people like I would say. We would all say that when we're at the store, when we're at the beach, when we're going for a walk, when we're in their homes. No, no, no.
Yeah.
This was different. There's a
Okay. That's really
locked
important
door
to know.
called a
Yeah.
prison. You know, so it's not like I can't evaluate the Iranian people according to the staff at the prison.
That's
No,
a wonderful point.
there's a total disconnect.
Yep. Yep.
So they're in their job, not what they would love to do if I met them outside at a coffee shop, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but how I was treated was, it was horrible. I was beaten every day by one man. And I was fed twice a day, but the food wasn't very good. But they never let me out of my cell. They would bring food with a cart to the room. My room was about 5 by 10 feet, very small little room. I slept on the floor. There was no mattress or anything. It was cold outside. There was snow outside, so it was cold. But there was a heater, but it wasn't very good. And then, there was a toilet and a sink, and this was my life. Door was not a barred door like you might see in American movies of prison, but it was just a steel door with a peek hole.
Okay.
And this was my life every day, just sitting there every day, not knowing if I'd get beaten again. Every day wondering, like, how long would I ever be there? Did anyone even know I was there? Or
were you allowed to contact your family or anyone?
No.
Oh.
No. And I found out later my friend was, but I never had that. So no one, as far as I knew, no one knew where I was.
You were off the map.
I was off the map. My parents probably thought I drowned in a river, or who knows where I was. But
oh man.
Yeah, like it's as far as I know, they know nothing. Yeah.
My goodness.
And so they don't know if I'm even in Iran. They thought, he probably left Iran and had an accident. Who knows? Yeah. So with that comes despair. With that comes just questioning everything. And the first 2 weeks was this sort of winding down of faith. Yeah, I had faith, but it was faith in God more than faith in the situation changing. And so the situation changing got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it ended 2 weeks into my being in prison with the worst day of my life.
And what happened then?
I woke up one day and I was done. I was done inside. I'm like, why sit here? And the next thing I know is this thought comes into my mind. Why spend the rest of your life here? And then I looked, and there was a sink in the room, and I knew if I took my sock, I could plug the sink. If I filled it with water, I could take a towel they had given me, which was very big, but there were places on the side of the sink to tie the towel, and I thought, wait a minute, if I tie it super tight on one end, put my head under the water with the sock keeping the water in, if I put the towel over my head on the other side, and then if I tie it super tight on the other end, then when I start to gag, I can't untie it if it's super tight. And I thought to myself, Dan, 6-7 minutes, you're going to be free. You're going to be free. Let's get out of here. And 4 times I tried.
Really?
And every time I tried, I was too scared. I was too scared to tie the towel tight. And when I would start to gag being under the water, I would be able to untie it and get my head out. And I'll never forget the fourth time, because that's when something radically broke in my heart. I tried a fourth time, it didn't work. And that's when I fell to the ground. If I ever felt shame, I felt shame at that moment. If I ever felt broken, I felt broken at that moment. Like, Dan, what are you doing? And yet it was at that moment that, one of the greatest moments of my life. The room starts to shake. As it starts to shake, I lift my head. The room became a glorious white light, much brighter than the normal light in there. As I stared at the wall, I had a vision. I've had a few visions in my life, but it was simply a vision of Jesus, very similar to what we might see in a movie of the Middle East or Middle Eastern people. But as I looked at Jesus, what I saw in his face was kindness. What I saw was love and acceptance and a smile, and it was just incredibly kind. And as I stared at Jesus, I had a sense of him speak this right to my heart, these simple words: Dan, I still want you. Dan, I still like you. Dan, what you did not end it between us. No. I still like you. I still want you. And if you let me, I'll take care of you. And the vision ends. And from that moment until today, I've never had those thoughts again.
Wow.
I've never tried to kill myself. At the moment of my greatest depravity, my greatest nothingness, God still wanted me. God still liked me. And for God to rescue me from that place, he did not just rescue me from prison. No, he rescued me from myself.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
And so many times and as I talk to people around the world, wow, they just feel like they've gone too far. Man, I had gone too far. Not only had I been a jerk, I'd been a real jerk. It's really okay, God's nice and forgiving, but
I think that's how a lot of people feel. He's nice and forgiving for all of them, but me. Yep.
Yeah. And, or it's like I've just done the worst thing. And even if I had done the worst thing, trying to kill myself, God is like, I still like you. And it changed my life forever.
Wow. So where does the story go from there? Did your perspective on it all change after that moment? Or was it still pretty rough and you still didn't know what was coming?
No, it was still rough, but I think I crossed that line to where I'll never try that again in that sense.
Okay. Yep.
But the door's still locked. There's still me. I could be there the rest of my life, but it was more, how do I find the peace and joy of the Lord in living here rather than I'm done with this, or I can't handle it.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We could do 2 hours on that.
Oh, yeah.
Can you give me a good 5 minutes on it? Come on.
I mean,
how do you find peace? Yes. Tell me.
Well, basically, it has to do with circumstances, right? So,
yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Is God still good when circumstances are lame? Is God still good when circumstances are not what we thought or not what it should be or not what, we thought it would be like? And here I am at the very worst of the worst circumstances. Okay, say God's good. I don't want to just say it because the Bible says it. I want to say it because I believe it.
Oh.
And how do you get that journey from what the Bible says to me believing
to what
even if the circumstances are not changing, even if the circumstances are horrible,
Yep. Yeah.
And for me, it has.
I'm waiting for it. How do we, Dan?
Awesome. And I would simply say Colossians 3:1, set your mind on things above.
Oh,
Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Philippians 4:8, whatsoever things are honest, whatever those words are, do that,
yes, all the good things. Oh.
And think about God, like if your mind is basically playing tricks with you, not God's character being faulty. And so I had to start staring at God again and again and again. It's hard, like, because my emotions are like, yeah, but I'm here, or I'll be here forever, or why do they keep beating me? But I kept turning to Jesus. And it became very, very real, this life of Paul, where he came to this crazy place in his journey saying, I've learned content. And I'm like, I am not learning to be content sitting here. And then you read the life of Paul and you're like, dude, he was like beat 20, 30 times, like in prison and everything else. And yet he wasn't lying. Yeah. I've learned to be content. So I'm like, God, I want that. I don't know how to get it, but I think it really started coming. It wasn't overnight, but it simply fixed my eyes on Jesus. Hebrews 12:3, fix your eyes on Jesus, and just leave it there. And, thinking about the promises of God, the character of God, not letting the circumstances run your life. And I've had to do that throughout my life. Last year during lockdown,
Yeah.
And I thought back to my prison experience, last year when I had 11 weeks of nothing sitting there in Arlington. Okay, I had a lot more freedom than prison. The world is shut down in many
The emotions are I'm sure, a bit identical.
They are, and I'm like, and God was okay. But I knew from that experience in Iran, it's like, okay, the emotions are strong now, but let's look at God. And so I just did that. And over time, the peace and joy of the Lord, though it was hard to find it, it grew.
And it grew from, you would say, adjusting your mindset about God. Is that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Okay.
God's bigger than I thought.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then basically the sovereignty of God, like, is he really good, or is he really, really good? Okay. Or is he really, really, really good? Or no.
And your thing.
Or no, maybe he's really, 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 like, really, really good. Like, what does good mean?
You learned that in prison?
I had to, because
I love it. I love it so much. This is so counterculture.
Sure it is, because your flesh and everything inside of you, all the self-help books are get out of prison, 100%.
I mean, somebody blogs something bad about us and I'm in a tizzy for a week. I'm like, God, where are you? And it's like, oh my goodness, pull yourself together, girl. Like, this is you were in one of the most dire circumstances that you could be in. And you got low. And I love that you're honest about the low place, because it makes your journey so much more relatable, because I think so often people just expound on the high place they reached, and they are never really transparent about, I wanted to die. Yeah. There was and I really appreciate that from you. And I think it will, and it has, and will help so many people, is just that, this is where I was, but even nothing changed in your circumstances. And that's what's so hard, because I often think like, if this would just get solved, then I will be X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, no, I was the same way. And I had to realize that either God was good, period.
Okay.
Or he's only good if good things happen, No. He's actually good, period. And so I said, God, I don't see that. And I had a lot of time to read the book of Philippians, where he wrote it from prison. I'm like, that guy,
It's his most joyful book. Yeah.
It's like, no. Okay, he must have been on drugs, like, no.
No, honestly,
is,
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
I found something, and I'm like, God, I want to find that something too.
And you did.
And I did. It wasn't overnight, but as I chose thousands of choices every day, looking at God, at his character, who he is, at the promises of God, not letting my circumstances run my heart disposition over time, peace grew and grew and grew, and hope grew and grew and grew. And then with that, I got to see some glorious moments of the goodness of God in prison.
That is so good. I'm almost chuckling at how relatable your story is to me because I have never experienced anything like it. But it transcends the goodness of God. And I love what you said about the goodness of God has to overtake the situation or the circumstances. And sometimes they can get so difficult that, I mean, we've had people in our church just this week like lose children, and it's just the situations of life can be so excruciating. And why? What's the verse like? We blame God, but we're the ones that are doing it all. I forget the reference, but it's so easy to go to God as you mentioned, like, you were really good until I'm here. Yeah. And then you found a way for him to be not only good, but really, 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 really good. Yeah. And that, although none of my listeners will most likely experience what you have, I think it will really help all of us. Just the perspective of, hey, if Dan can do it in prison, I think I can outlast. I think I can handle a bad post about me, you know? So what's the rest? Okay, well, first of all, before I get to how you got out of prison, do you have anything in your memory as to just goodness of God within the prison and how you saw that manifest?
Yeah, a couple of stories. They're not super short, but yeah,
I love it. You can take all the time you want. I love this.
Okay, so I'm on this journey of letting the goodness of God become solid in my heart, even if my circumstances are not changing. They get me on a bus. My friend has already been released from prison. He got released by a phone call from Nelson Mandela because South Africa was a buyer of Iranian oil, and politically, and that got all sorted. But I know that, but I also know I'm still there, which makes me even more real. Like, okay, his situation was different, and I'm stuck. But I have this growing reality of the goodness of God, even if my circumstances don't change. They take me to the courthouse one day, and I don't know why. I don't know where I am. They said, oh, it's your trial day. I'm like, what? And that's when they got very official about 2 death sentences. One for being a missionary and one for being a spy. They walk me into a room. It's a courtroom. Looks like an American TV courtroom thing. Seen hundreds of people, video cameras. And in walks the judge. And the judge looks at me and says this: tell us today, sir, why? Why did you come to Iran? And there I am at this moment, and everything inside of me is fearful. And yet there was something greater than the fear that was in me, that I knew was in me, but it was like, how much can it come out? And I'm standing there shaking, and then that scripture pops in my mind, Matthew 10:19. Do not be afraid when you're called before the authorities, for that time give you the words to say. Again, all glory to Jesus. But I looked at that judge and I said, actually, I came here to tell you about Jesus Christ. Wow. And as soon as I said those words, my natural reaction was, oh my gosh, I'm crazy, you know? And yet at that moment, I'm like, deep in my gut, I'm like, that is why I came here. Yeah. And then something welled up within me, and again, all glory to God. And then I said it a second time and a third time. And I ended up preaching for over half an hour in that courtroom. Again, all glory to God, but something just burst out of me.
Hmm.
And in the midst of this moment of sharing the love of Jesus in the most unlikely of places, I began to realize something else. And that was that I was free.
Hmm.
That I was free. Why? Because you can't kill a dead man. You can't kill a dead man.
Well,
Like, okay, they
said.
They killed me. So what? I'm going to heaven. I'm going to be in heaven forever. Like, okay, they killed his body, but that's not the real Dan. Real Dan has given his life to Jesus, and he's owned by Jesus, and Jesus is good, and they can't take that away. And yeah, it was all glory to God, but yeah, one of the most special moments of my life. And the reaction was a bit crazy. They didn't kill me, which you probably realized.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, they were shocked, It's not really the alibi story that a spy should give, like
Yeah.
if you're a spy, you're not going to start talking about something else that's also a problem in the country.
Right. No, you're just here to meet a lady friend.
I'm just like a tourist or whatever.
Yeah, just here to see the sights.
So, but it ended up being super special. And God, I love what God did in my heart. But even in my fears, he met me and allowed me to do that.
That's so good. So how did that part of your journey end?
I went back in there, but then I had another journey that really shook my life that I'll tell you. And this was more of a journey that was not just once, it was many days. But the very first day I was beaten, I didn't know it, but I would get beaten by the same man every day. And the very first day I was beaten by him, I felt like the Holy Spirit speak to me and say, I want to teach you to love your enemies. And I thought to myself, this is not a good time,
Yeah. No, thank you.
And God just kept pushing it. And I finally felt like God say simply this, Dan, ask me what I think of him. And throughout my journey, I love how God changes the subject. So often the subject of life is so connected to our emotions and can often be challenging. And yet in that moment, God is still good and loves us. And he changed the subject on me. And I felt him say the simple question, Dan, ask me what I think of him. And I'm like, okay. So I was like, God, what do you think of this man? And then the love of God hit me. And I realized that God knew his name. God knew the name of his wife and his kids. That God had always loved him. There was only one challenge, and it was that he didn't know it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, you really love him. He's like, Dan, more than you'll ever know. My God changed my heart. I want my heart to be run by what's on your heart, not by what I'm experiencing or feeling. And so, yeah, by God's grace, all glory to God. Over the coming weeks, the beatings kept coming, but God changed my heart. I started to love him and bless him, say good things about him. I never said bad things about him. I'll never forget, though, the last day I saw him. I had no idea it'd be the last day I see him. They take me into this room, it was an interrogation room. They take off my blindfold. It's just me and him, blood stains on the floor. I knew that people had been beaten in there. And again, thinking, okay, what's today going to look like? I'm so scared. But as I stood there, something happened inside. And all I can say is Jesus. But I looked at him that day and I said, sir, if I'm going to see you every day the rest of my life, let's become friends.
Wow.
He's like, what? And I'm like, something rose within me. And I'm like, no, sir, today things change. Today, let's become friends. And he looks at me and goes, no, we will never be friends. I'm like, no. Things change today. Today we become friends. And let's start by shaking hands and exchanging names.
Oh, wow.
58, because that was the number of my cell. He had never told me his name. And something rose up within me, and I leaned out my hand to shake his hand. And I said, let's be friends. And that's when he froze. And then he starts to look around. It's just me and him in there. And then he takes his hand out and he shakes my hand.
Wow.
When he shakes my hand, he doesn't let go. As he doesn't let go, tears start to fall down his face. The tears are falling down his face. He looks at me and he says, Dan. And he called me by my name.
Wow.
He said, my name is Razak, which is a common Iranian name, and I would love to be your friend.
Wow.
And he kept holding my hand and he kept crying. He finally let go and he wiped the tears from his eyes. And he looked at me and he goes, Dan, I'm so glad we're friends. I'm like, yeah, me too. He's like, Dan, I don't make the decisions. I said, I know that.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't get you out. I said, I know that. He's like, but maybe in the prison, I can get you something like, you want anything in the prison? I'm like, sure, a bigger room. He's like, okay. And I've never seen that man again in my life.
No way.
But later that night, the night guards came to my cell and said, sir, we have orders to move you to a bigger cell.
Oh, wow.
And I knew that God had changed that man's heart because there's no heart to a heart of Jesus.
What? Can you say that again? You just cut out. There's no what?
There's no heart too hard for Jesus. Like, Dan, you could be here 15 months. You could be here like 5 years, Dan, like 10 years. And I remember just sitting there and I just looked up to God and I wanted one thing. And it was simply this, is I wanted to understand. Like, how could this be the love of God in action? How could this be the plan God had for me? And God said nothing. And I don't know the time frame, but it must have been 2, 3 in the morning. But finally my heart gave up and I said, God, I don't understand why I'd be here the rest of my life, but I don't need to know. I trust you. I trust you.
You really, really felt it.
I felt it at the deepest place of my heart. Gave up control. I said, I give up control of figuring this out. I give up control of understanding your ways. I trust you with what I don't see. I trust you with what makes no sense. I trust you at the deepest level, giving up control. And as soon as I did, peace flooded my soul. And what happens when God gets our heart is the surprise around the corner. It was literally 3-4 hours later.
Oh, no way.
Literally less than 3-4 hours. They bust into my room, said, gather your things. I didn't have many things. I don't know what I'm doing. Take me to another room. In this other room, they take me and they're like, get dressed. And I'm expecting another set of prison clothes.
Yeah.
I look down and it's my clothes.
The clothes you wore, yeah.
That I came in.
I can't imagine what that must have felt like.
Oh my gosh. So first of all, they didn't fit. I had lost 55 pounds.
55?
Yeah,
pounds?
not because of lack of eating, but just because I was a nervous wreck.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
And so then I'm thinking, why? Why are they making me get dressed? And my thought was, wow, maybe this is the day, like real execution day, because I knew people had been killed in there. Why would they just make me get dressed in my clothes otherwise? So they took me outside. They put me on the bus that I'd been to the courthouse in. But this time they didn't take me to the courtroom. They took me to a simple office. I went in, don't know what's going on. This man walks in, turns out that he's the head judge of the courts of Iran. Like the head guy.
Yeah.
And he stands up and he says this, today, as we've been working with the Swiss embassy, We choose to release Dan Baumann, and he's a free man.
Wow.
And what? It was like Jesus was looking over from heaven. Surprise! The best surprise ever.
The minute you gave up control and truly settled in your heart.
I gave up control. God did something really beautiful.
That you never could have done.
No.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, I was released from prison, 100% the mercy and grace of God.
Mm-hmm.
And God saved me not only from prison, but from myself. And I want that story to be known all over, because I just I meet a lot of people who, either think they've crossed the line or two, more faith or more prayer or more something will fix it.
He's gonna fix it. Yep.
And I just saw God fix it because he's kind.
Oh.
And there was an ambassador in the room, and he walks up to me and he's like, "You're coming with me." I'm like, "Yes, sir." And I get to his car and I lock those doors. We get to his house. He starts to tell me what he knows, which is really shaky. Like, he's like, "You were released by the president of the country, but it was not official. It was totally under wraps. So we gotta get you out of here, because the government, the Congress, the normal working force, they don't know what the government decided. So we got to get you out." He said, "There's a flight in 2 days to Germany. We'll connect you to Switzerland, but we got to get you out." And I got to be at his house for 2 days, ambassador's residences. Highly recommend.
Better than the Four Seasons.
Oh my God. Woo. He tells the maid, he's like, "Whatever this guy wants, get it for him." I'm like, "No."
Oh. Well, God prepares a table, right?
Oh, gosh.
In the presence of our enemies.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, well, I don't want to keep you a lot longer. I feel like we could talk for hours because I just have so many other questions about what was happening in you. But can you tell me how that experience informed the rest of your life? What did God do in those moments that you had to accomplish in order to live out the rest? Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Let me just end my prison story a little bit here.
Oh, there's more. Yes. Go.
Yeah. I don't want to let people think that I stayed at that ambassador's house forever.
Yeah. Well, if you did, it's a nice wall behind you right now.
But I finally got on that plane to Germany. So scared, so shaky. But I finally landed in Germany, and I finally got to Switzerland. And I was free. I was finally free to go for a walk. I was finally free to use my phone. I was finally free to call a friend. And all the freedoms of life I'd taken for granted. But the best freedom I got back was that I could throw rocks with Jesus again. Yeah, from that day, my parents had joined YWAM, and I've been working and continuing working with Youth with a Mission since then, training, teaching. I go back a lot all over the Muslim world. God's love for the Muslim world has only grown in my heart. So and I've just been walking out this journey since that time. I don't have 5 minutes without thankfulness. I live in constant thankfulness.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know I could be in prison. The ambassador told me that, without certain changes, I would have been in prison for 10, 20 years. And I've seen the goodness of God in hard situations.
Yeah.
And I am just overwhelmed how good he is.
Oh, thank you so much, Dan. This has been really encouraging to me. I'm nowhere near close to being imprisoned in Iran, but I tell you what, it still works, right? For every situation, because it's finding the goodness of God in difficult situations. Yep. And you had to make the choice to do it, and you did. And I just honor you and your choice and the there's so many people who will grow in a friendship with God because of it.
Oh man, I'm so honored to be able to tell it. And yeah, I don't want to belittle it as well. I don't want to belittle anybody's situation.
Of course not, because hard is hard. But
Right.
I think your story helps
Yeah.
put some things into perspective that sometimes need to be put into perspective.
No, I'm so with you. And
Oh my goodness.
if God can deliver me from a prison cell in Iran, he can do kind of anything.